The British and Irish Lions have put Australia to the sword in the opening game of this three-match series in Brisbane, 27 points to 19. This is a result that will have surprised precisely no one. I'm afraid we all saw this coming. I tried to put an optimistic, positive spin on this game. I even did the unthinkable and wore Australian colours to show solidarity and support to our brethren across the Tasman. I know most of you are Kiwis, so I speak on your behalf. And look, ultimately, the scoreline was probably better looking than it could have been. 1927, that's healthy. There's some pride to take out of that from an Aussie perspective. And there are some positives. There's a few drops of water in the glass. Not sure it's quite half full, but some bodies are coming back for the Wallabies next week for the return fixture in Melbourne. We're going to talk about how the Aussies clawed their way back into the game in the second half. But the reality is, guys, this game was pretty much done just after halftime. Early on, as we saw some bruising hit-ups from the big Lions forward pack, you did just start to rue the absence of Rob Valetini for Australia, the best blindside flanker running around. Not only that, we probably could... Wow, you see me saying we? You see how bought into this Aussie team I am? We, the Wallabies, probably could have benefited from a unit like Will Skelton out there. Not sure about his cardiovascular conditioning at this level these days, but you just felt we were a little bit undermanned in terms of sheer size and ball-carrying ability. And so Finn Russell had time and space to just do Finn Russell things. I think it was about 10 minutes into the game that Tui Pelotu, the big, powerful Scottish midfielder, basically strolled over for a try, made it all look a little bit too easy. And you have to say that Scottish midfield pairing looked pretty good. Tuipulotu and Hugh Jones, excellent. Excellent for the Lions. And it's interesting seeing just how good these Scotsmen are, particularly when they have world-class players all around them. I mean, they shine for Scotland, but you realize they're operating at a little bit of a deficit when you see how good they are behind a Lions forward pack. Jones had a try, disallowed. All the momentum was with the Lions, but a moment of brilliance from Australia, individual brilliance. Max Jorgensen, who otherwise had been quiet to error-prone, actually beat Hugo Keenan in the air, helped himself to a try. That was a little flash of brilliance the Aussies needed. But there were signs that quality was sporadic for Australia. Individualistic moments of excellence. But in general, a predictable, grinding sense of inevitability to the Lions' forward play and their muscular presence at the breakdown. You saw James Logo close for a try. You saw Joe McCarthy close for a try. He is in doubt for the upcoming games. But ultimately, the pick and go started to really pay dividends when Tom Curry was able to get over the line. And then it was lights out early in the second half. I think it was about a minute or two when Curry and Jones played their part in getting Sheehan over in the corner. I called him a try-scoring machine in the preview of this game. Well, he lived up to my rather grandiose proclamation there, did dot down in the corner. This guy scores tries like he's a midfielder or outside back. And you just were thinking, how the hell does Australia get their way back into this? Even the Australian fans in Brisbane, who were in good voice, good spirit, it just sort of seemed like they knew what was coming. And I don't want to say they accepted it. There were some faraway looks in the eyes of the Australian fans up there in Vegas. But it turns out that when the two sides went to their benches in the second half, the Aussies might have actually got more of a lift. The Lions bench was okay. They're a little bit middling compared to the starters, whereas a guy like Carlo Tizano coming on for Australia did make an impact. The Aussies looked more sure-footed at the breakdown, and in fact, Tizano helped himself to a try off the back of some good pick and go, and just some good continuity and support play around the ruck, where honestly, the Lions were sort of cleaning the Aussies' clock at times in the first half, particularly with that dominant performance from Tom Curry. Marcus Smith kept the pressure ticking over on the scoreboard with a penalty. That had the Lions up 15 points, so the Aussies needed more than 2 converted tries. Tate McDermott did get one, and look, he was another shining light for Australia. He came off the bench, sniped well, as many of us predicted, and it just made you think, boy, why the hell was Jake Gordon out there starting. Now, I think he's a decent player for the Waratahs. I think he had a good season. But in terms of chemistry with Tom Lynagh, the young number 10, who is a Red, shouldn't Tate McDermott have been inside him? Have a bit of that continuity, that chemistry, that connective tissue. I just wonder if that's maybe the way you want to go next week. Because I do think Lynagh will back up again. Just to focus on the young Aussie 10 for a second, I thought he did great. All things considered, look at the quality of the opposition, the best of the 4 home nations in red-hot form. They've warmed up with a romp through all the Super Rugby teams and in Australia and New Zealand 15. I mean, they are firing on all cylinders. This was stiff opposition, to say the least, the biggest understatement of the century. But he more or less held his own. He didn't look overawed. I like his attitude. I like his composure. I think the Aussies are onto something here. I could see him being the starting number 10 in 2027. I'm sure that's what Joe Schmidt is trying to set up at this point for Les Kiss, who's going to be coming in to coach the Wallabies, take them through to that home World Cup. I mean, I don't want to be too glass half full here. You've got to remember the Wallabies didn't get the win today, but as a look to the future, I thought Lynagh did a pretty handy job out there at 10. So Tag Byrne in the end was the man of the match, but you'd have to think that Tom Curry was in the conversation. Formidable at the breakdown, good link play. He even had a one-handed catch when the Wallabies overthrew their line out intentionally, and that led to a monstrous line break. So just, good stuff from Curry on both sides of the ball. A lot of talk about whether young Pollock from England should have been somewhere in the 23. Some people even felt he should be starting. Well, I think Curry underlined his class. And if you've been watching the Six Nations closely the last couple of years, he has invariably been the best number 7 on show. So just a continuation of that form. In terms of the set piece, I mean, the Aussies actually did better at scrum time than I think many of us would have predicted. They were not just solid there, they were actually dominant at times. They did get some scrum penalties. The Lions were better in the air. That was a good source of possession for them, going to the line out and able to pressure the Wallabies line out also. The Aussies have star power in the backs, but guys like Tom Wright was shut down. Harry Potter was shut down. Joseph Suali'i did barrel over the line later on in the game. You thought maybe it was a try. It was disallowed. But they just pretty much gang tackled him. I mean, they knew that Suali'i had that X-factor threat. They defended accordingly. Not saying Joseph Suali'i had a bad game. He should definitely be out there again next week. It was a good combination in midfield with Len Ikitau. But, man, they had their lasers set on him. There was a bullseye on Suali'i, so he didn't find a lot of space to work his magic. In terms of the kicking duel, I mean, I think you would have to say the Lions definitely won that battle. But, some blunders from the back 3. Obviously, there was that bad take from Keenan that led to Jorgensen scoring. Just a little surprised by the ineptitude of the Lions back 3 in the air in terms of kick receipts and that kind of thing. But in terms of the kicking duel and returning the ball with interest off the foot, a longer, superior kicking game from the Lions, a bit more accurate. Don't think the Wallabies backline kicked particularly well in this game. So that's an area they can work on to improve in Melbourne. And look, we have to give credit to the Aussies for the fact that, they won much of the second half. So does that portend, hey, maybe there's going to be a turnaround in Melbourne? I'm just not sure. I think that the Lions were so far ahead just after halftime on the scoreboard, but momentum-wise, pressure-wise, at the breakdown, they were lapping the Aussies. Did they just take a foot off the pedal? Was the game no longer in doubt, so they eased off a bit? I guess we'll find out next week in Melbourne. I do think the return of Rob Valetini is going to make a big difference. The Aussies will be better for this hit out. Look, there were guys like Jake Gordon haven't played since May. So a bit of ring rust for the Aussies. I think they'll make some personnel changes. We'll talk about those during the week when I preview both teams, but some worrying signs in terms of injuries for the Lions. As I mentioned, Joe McCarthy is under an injury cloud, but we'll get more information in coming days. Guys, I'm just going to leave you with my prediction, which the Lions are going to go 3-0 in this series. I don't want it to be the case. I'm praying that the Wallabies turn it around, make it interesting next week. But I think they have a mighty hill to climb. Honestly, I'm just going to give them credit for getting to 19-27. It could have been a bigger blowout. And I think, if anything, the score perhaps flatters the home side a bit. But tons of heart. They never gave up. just simply outmanned and outclassed today. All right, guys, drop your comments on the game. Send this video to someone who loves rugby. Please like, please subscribe. And hell, maybe we'll go for 3 videos this weekend. Maybe I'm going to take a look at the Springboks next. Let's keep it going. All right, guys, I'll catch you soon. Bye for now.